Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight we have a late night insight video on a discontinued Roja fragrance, and it's called Roja Parfums Goodman's. My buddy DL Qualia, who sent me this decant, wrote Goodman's Pour Homme, but actually the way it worked is Roja released two fragrances for the department store Bergdorf Goodman, and Roja Parfums Bergdorf is the women's version, and Roja Parfums Goodman's is the men's version. So I don't think it's technically Goodman's Pour Homme, but just semantics. And so I've been sitting on this for a while, so I guess the first thing I should do is say thank you to my good friend D.L. Qualia for sparing me a couple precious drops of this juice, which I do not have in my collection. And I like doing these videos because I assume I'm never going to have this in my collection. And this is really one of my only chances to do a review on a fragrance like this, or at least talk about it. Not really a review because it's not like I've worn a whole bottle and I know it like the back of my hand or anything like that. This is truly a late night insight video. This is going to be a quick hit video. That's number one. Number two, it is discontinued. MSRP when this was available for purchase, 50 mils was $545, which is like, and I was making a joke in my earlier video today. I did a video on Montana Camore, which came out in 2004. Beautiful fragrance. Ended up buying a bottle off of a decant from a friend. And that one's also discontinued, but I made the joke of I'm putting out these videos on 20-year-old discontinued fragrances while everyone else who is on the free bottle train is putting out their videos on the new Elysium Eau Intense Roja. So I guess this sticks in line exactly with what I want to do. I want to go against the grain. So while everyone else, if you've seen somebody put out a video in the last, let's say, week of the new Eau Intense Elysium, you know they're on the free bottle train. You can just go ahead and unsubscribe to them because you can't believe a word that they're saying, number one. And I like going against the grain. I like doing my own thing. So even though I don't have a pretty bottle to show you of Goodman's, I've shown you enough Roja bottles over my time, and we'll talk about one here actually today that there's some bits and pieces. Actually, I'll go even a step further and say it's not just one Roja fragrance, but Goodman's is encompassed of about 4 or 5 different Roja fragrances, as is becoming very customary with this house. If you've smelled one, you start to smell bits and pieces of others in them. I think they sort of create like a master DNA, and then they just sort of swap in ingredients here and there and rename things and change things around. And I can't say I really blame them. It's a great money-making project for them to do such a thing. But once you start smelling as many Roja fragrances as I have, you can start to really pick out themes and similarities. And the reason I decided to do this review tonight, actually, is I had just a few precious drops of another one of his fragrances, which is called L'Oscar Pour Homme. He made that for Hotel L'Oscar. And I actually have a review on the channel. And if you want to see my reviews, I have a playlist you can go to, Roja Parfums playlist, and you can see all of my Roja fragrances just back to back to back, or reviews, if you will, back to back to back. And in L'Oscar, there's a very unique note called Mayflower, and Mayflower is also found in Goodman's Pour Homme, or Goodman's. That's going to confuse me the whole time, but Goodman's. And so there are some very similarities that you'll find in pretty much all parts of the makeup and the DNA of Goodman's. In the top, you get a little bit of this almost reckless. If you've ever smelled Roja's Reckless Pour Homme, Roja's Reckless Pour Homme really reminded me. I actually have a review of this as well. It was the day I came back from the Great Wolf Lodge, and Reckless Pour Homme reminds me very strongly of Clive Christian X for men. And actually, this is one of the few times I think I actually prefer the Clive Christian. Now, to be fair, I do have the EDP, but even my buddy who owns the Pure Parfum says it doesn't last very long. Longevity is terrible on this. It is a very nice smell, but I actually prefer Clive Christian's X. But if you've smelled that sort of cinnamony, red hot cinnamon DNA, almost like a modernized Halston Z14, if you will, you'll have an idea of what Reckless Pour Homme smells like. There's a little bit of that in Goodman's as well. And then finally, there's a little bit of Vetiver Parfum Pour Homme because of the base, and we'll talk about that as well with the review. So the difference really for me with La Oscar, instantly what you realize, because I wore it to bed last night, so it's fresh in my mind, is La Oscar Pour Homme leans much more heavily on one of Roja's favorite notes. And if you know any of Roja's work, you know that Labdenum is a big part of his compositions, one of his absolute most important ingredients, I would say. And I absolutely adore Labdenum. And so that's why I say I have this love-hate relationship with the House of Roja Dove, because on one hand, I really don't like the marketing gimmicks. I don't like the price at all. This whole pure luxury, $1,000, $2,000 bottles of perfume is outrageous. But on the other hand, I really like sort of his love of vintage perfumes. I share his love of vintage perfumes, and I like the way he constructs his scents. And I do think that his fragrances do smell, to me, to my nose. And again, you only smell with your nose. I only smell with my nose, so you have to trust your own nose. But to my nose, his fragrances smell above some of the other, luxury houses, the Xerjoffs and the Fragrance Dubois and all that stuff. I'd put Roja a step ahead, if you will. That's just my opinion. That's my personal opinion. But it does feel like once you get to sort of know his work and understand the way that he likes to construct a pyramid, and you start to see these similarities, whenever you smell Goodman's Pour Homme, and I've got about a 2-hour dry down, 2.5-hour dry down here. It's about almost 11 o'clock, so 2.5 hours. And when you smell Goodman's Pour Homme, you realize that there is almost like a hole in the construction where the Labdenum should be in many of his other creations, right? So with the note listing, basically what you get is you get bergamot and mandarin orange in the top, and the citruses in the top are beautiful. It's a beautiful opening. It's actually a really pleasant fragrance. This will be a great work fragrance is the way I think of it. And then in the heart, you have May Rose, Jasmine from Grass, Mayflower, Neroli, and Ylang Ylang, with a base of vetiver, cedarwood, frankincense, cardamom, cinnamon, coriander, musk, and patchouli. And so there's this hole in this composition because I do think that this is a Chypre, okay? I think this is a proper Chypre. Even though he doesn't state it's a Chypre, my guess is that it is a Chypre construction. Even though there's no Labdenum listed, maybe he did sort of sneak a little bit in there just to say, okay, it's a Chypre. Just my guess. That's just my guess smelling this composition. But it almost is a little bit of a shapeshifter, because I could easily see the case for some people saying it leans more fougere, and it can have, it's not like this is a hard line in the sand, guys. It's sort of, you could have a fragrance that has characteristics of both Chypre and fougere, but I think if you kind of really twisted my arm, and with Roja's love of Chypre fragrances, I think this is more of a Chypre. It's funny, I was just looking at my shirt today. I swear every time I review a Roja fragrance, I'm always wearing like some boring t-shirt or something. And not that it matters, but I wear my fragrances anywhere. I'm just wearing this to bed tonight anyways, but one of these days I'll be properly dressed up for one of these. So when you've smelled as many Rojas as I have, you sort of get to know what to expect. And it just feels like they took the Labdenum out when it comes to Goodman's Pour Homme. I'm just going to call it that, screw it. Goodman's Pour Homme. Just to say that it's different from his other compositions, XYZ composition. It really smells like this fragrance composition would have been a little bit better off with Labdenum. That's the first time. I've worn this to bed a couple times now, okay? So I haven't given it a full wear as my scent of the day, but I pretty much drained this decant that he sent me. And the first time I wore it, I was like, man, this is missing that Labdenum that I really think would improve this composition. And then today when I wore it again, and I really just gave it a chance on its own without trying to impart what I think, the Labdenum would have done to the fragrance, and just sort of paid attention to the way that it continued to break down and as it continues to dry. as it continues to dry, you realize that without that sort of resinous, leathery, sort of sticky, right, labdanum that Roja loves to use, and I love those in the compositions. The way he used it in Roja's Hautlux is one of my favorite uses of labdanum. But what it does is it allows some of the other notes in the composition to get some stage time, some spotlight. And so it allows the coriander and the spices to shine. And I mentioned earlier that I did a review today of Montana's Camor. And Camor has a very dry coriander. And actually, it's interesting because there's a little bit of this very dry coriander in Goodman's as well. And coriander sort of has this blend where half of it should come across to your nose as smelling sort of spicy and fresh and citrusy and soapy, and the other part should come across as this warm spice. Okay, so it should almost have, it blends very well with things like cumin and cinnamon and stuff like that, and you'll see that there is cinnamon in Goodman's, and it does blend. Some people think that the combination of citrus and cinnamon is weird. I don't at all. I think it's a natural sort of combination, if you will. But what it allows it to do is it allows both parts to sort of shine through, because you get this beautifully blended construction that allows things like the floral heart. And it is beautiful, I will admit. I know I give Roja a hard time. Damn it, he deserves it sometimes, honestly. You know, it's funny because listening to some of these other guys talk about you know, their experience with Roja, and you go watch their channels, and I just think it's humorous, whatever. I mean, you know, you go watch their channels though, and it's like, I spoke with Roja Dove about this composition, or you know, or Roja will come and actually leave a comment in there saying, thanks so much for reviewing my work, you know, when they know that they sent them the free bottle, right? I never get a surprise Roja visit on my channel. Although there is an open invitation, Roja. If you ever want to join, I would love to have you on. But you might have to lose the talking points and just come at me straight. So, interestingly enough, the way that it feels is removing that sort of leathery, sticky, resinous labdanum created this hole, is what I thought. But really, once I gave it more time, I thought it allowed more of the fragrance notes to shine through. The florals used are beautiful, I have to admit. The floral heart here is absolutely gorgeous, and it's unique because of that Mayflower note, which we'll talk about in just a second. And the base has, you know, notes that maybe usually just get sort of blended into this soup, but here they're allowed to sort of really breathe. They're allowed to shine. This fragrance really can breathe. And so that's the main sort of thing that jumped out to me on this wear, on round 2, the second time I've got a chance to wear it. And very posh floral heart. Now let's talk a little bit about the Mayflower, because the Mayflower is the note that reminds me of L'Oscar pour Homme. They both have that Mayflower note, which is a very unique note. Hardly ever do you see Mayflower used in a composition in fragrance. It's a very rare floral to see in a fragrance composition. And so this Mayflower sort of gives it this fuzzy, waxy, almost like shrub-like smell. There's almost this shrub-like smell to the composition, which can also come across, I guess you could imagine smelling like a rose, almost like a white floral rose, shrubby. Imagine like a shrubby, white floral, rosy-like smell. And Mayflowers have a very interesting facet about them. And the interesting facet is that the smell actually intensifies over time. So what happens is they start off with a very delicate aroma, very soft, very delicate, very gentle. And then as the time goes by, it begins to almost increase. It begins to intensify over time. So very interesting little note about the Mayflower. And that blend of unique florals and what ends up being a spicy vetiver is a very sensual, very interesting experience. Very sensual, very wearable, very office friendly, very very high class, you know. There's a quote that I wanted to read you. Roja wrote a little blurb, and he said that the blurb was that asked to create a fragrance for Goodman's, the men's home of the iconic world-famous store, Bergdorf Goodman, I have tried to capture that special mix of sophistication, excitement, and pure luxury. I hope my Goodman's fragrance delivers all the hallmarks of the store, exclusive, refined, and very New York. Now, how do you make a fragrance smell New York? I'm sure you guys have some ideas in the comments. I'll let you guys say that. I'm not going to say anything about that. But how do you make a fragrance smell like New York? I have no idea. But what he basically created is something that seems very high class. You know, Bergdorf Goodman was created in 1901. It was founded in 1901. So they've been around forever. They're an iconic, the store itself, I think, is sort of split up. Like, it's a big old warehouse in New York. Half the store is like for women, half the store is for men. I guess it's kind of an experience if you ever get a chance to go. You know, once you hit the 1 hour mark, that's where the fragrance starts to sort of, that's when the fragrance starts to sort of come into its own. And that's when the vetiver really starts to, I think, take control, wrestle control of the composition away. It will actually, again, remind you of another Roja fragrance, which I showed the bottle very quickly earlier, and that is Roja's Vetiver Parfum pour Homme. So this is Roja's sort of flagship vetiver fragrance. He claims that he made this for his partner. That's the claim anyways. And obviously I liked it enough to buy a bottle, although if you said, Ramsey, get rid of one of your Roja bottles, I'd probably get rid of that because I have some other vetivers which I consider a step above Roja's vetiver personally, but it is a very good vetiver. It's a very wearable vetiver. You can wear this pretty much all year round, even in the heat. I have no problem wearing this. And this sort of vetiver that Roja uses is this sort of dry, earthy, green, but also fresh. There's a freshness to Roja's vetiver. It doesn't have the dusty, smoky, darky, ink-like, you know, smell of Encre Noir or some of the darker vetivers. You know, if you've smelled, this is also a really dark vetiver. Maitre Parfumé Agantier's Root de Vetiver is a very dark vetiver because they do actually use the roots of the vetiver. It's almost so dark it has like this minty, this sort of earthy minty greenness to it. It's a very interesting vetiver. I need to do a review on this, but so many to get to. But yes, I need to wear this more. It's also very tarry, right? Or even Encre Noir. That's another very dark, earthy, inky vetiver. It's not that at all. But on the other hand, it also doesn't have like the freshness of Creed's original vetiver. It's not grassy and green and fresh. Or I would actually put it somewhere in the middle. Roja's vetiver is like a tweener. It's like it sort of falls in between the really light, ethereal, grassy, you know, summery vetivers, citrusy vetivers, and the very dark, earthy, inky, volcanic vetivers, if you want to call it that. It falls in the middle. It's not too sharp and dark. It's not too bright and clean either. It's somewhere in the middle. And what I will say about this fragrance is how all of the notes sort of bleed down the pyramid. That's the one thing that I noticed about this scent that makes it very, very interesting to me. It's a very interesting scent. Because the notes literally they bleed down the pyramid. What I mean by that is the citruses in the top almost feel enhanced. Like imagine giving citruses like a steroid shot. And that's what the citruses in this fragrance remind me of. And I mentioned a couple fragrances earlier that this, you know, composition reminds me of. And the more and more I thought about this bleeding down into the pyramid effect, the more it reminded me of Harrods pour Homme. And the more I started to think that, you know, of course this is going to be in line with something like Harrods pour Homme because his releases for the department stores, they're not supposed to be trying and challenging and unique and tough and hard to wear. They don't want some huge artistic endeavor. They want something that's going to smell classy and elegant and someone that can walk in, someone that can just drop $550 plus tax at the drop of a hat. and just let's say he was walking through Bergdorf Goodman's and he smelled this fragrance and thought, okay, I'm going to buy it. That's it. Just on a whim, because it doesn't matter. Because $550 to him is like $5 to us, right? And that's the type of person that they're targeting. And there's a lot of those people out there. And a lot of them are shopping at Bergdorf Goodman's. But the more I got to thinking about that, the more it started to make sense, because one of the most alluring and attractive things to someone to smell early on is beautiful citruses. And for those citruses to last into the dry down and be very wearable makes perfect sense. And there's a note actually that he used in many other fragrances of his. If you go check out some of my other reviews, you'll see it. I think it's in Oceania. I think it's in Harrods Parfum. I have reviews of all of those on the channel. It's in other of his fragrances as well. It may even be in this. It may even be in Vetiver. It's called Lytsea cubiba. And Lytsea cubiba is also a shrub, sort of like the Mayflower, but I think it grows in Asia, if memory serves. And it mimics the smell of citrus. And so it enhances the citrus into the dry down. When the bergamot and the mandarin has already sort of burned off, you'll still be smelling this, let's say, a cubiba note that will almost trick your brain into thinking you're still smelling bergamot and mandarin. And I think it's here. Even though it's not listed, my guess is it is here. Because the citrus notes just go on, and that bleeding effect deep into the pyramid is I think enhanced. Like I said, steroids, citruses on steroids. And also what ends up happening is the sort of Clive Christian for men, reckless Parfum, like I was mentioning earlier, this cinnamony DNA that I really also am not a big fan of the way that Roja kind of did that. But that spices also tend to bleed down into the base. So, one thing I will mention, though, is that the note listings don't agree. So if you go to Parfumo and base notes, they're pretty close to each other. But if you go to Fragrantica, they have notes of castoreum and civet in the base. And I get very little castoreum or civet, very little animalic anything in this. And like I was talking about earlier, with these being exclusives, with them being exclusive towards to the department stores, like I mentioned, Harrods, they have one for Madison, they have Bergdorf Goodman's, and all these different exclusives. I don't think they want something super challenging. I don't think they want something that's going to be hard to move in a department store like that setting. And so for them to have civet or castoreum or something challenging, which us frag heads want, obviously. My favorite Roja fragrance is Diaghilev. I love the heavy use of animalics in that. I love how big and baroque it is and all that. But it's different styles, if you will. And so if you read on Fragrantica the castoreum and the civet and that scares you, don't let it bother you. On the other hand, if you're looking for something animalic, don't get too excited, because this has listed castoreum and civet. If there is any, it is the absolute tiniest drop. He may have added just the tiniest drop because he loves, blending, very light, easy to wear, animalic notes. That's his thing. And the dry down, basically, as it fades into the dry down, what you're going to get is more and more of this Atlas cedar and patchouli. Those two notes are strong and they last, mixed with just a touch of frankincense. Nothing, don't think an amouage fragrance or anything else, but the tiniest wisp of incense just to keep it well blended. It's a classic Roja composition. It's unique. Very rarely have you smelled a floral heart of neroli rose, jasmine, sambac, ylang, and mayflower. But even though it's very classic composition, easy to wear, it smells very high quality, it is extremely overpriced, period. Now it's discontinued, so I doubt that he cares what I have to say about something that's not being sold anymore anyways. But when it was being sold, it was absolutely overpriced. Many of his fragrances are extremely overpriced for what they are. you know, just my opinion. But you know, if this is your type of luxury, if you are, you know, if this is what you consider luxury, I mean, you're gonna have a hard time finding other fragrances that do what this does. I could easily see somebody smelling this and just falling in love with it. For me, it's a pass. I mean, unless a bottle falls into my lap for like $100 or something, I'm out. You know, if it fell into my lap for $100, I'd go for it. If nowadays though people think they're, you know, they think they're sitting on like a lottery ticket or something. I'm going to retire off of my Bergdorf Goodman bottle. Like, no, you're not. You know, no one's going to give you $1,000 for that, buddy. Well, they may, but if you do, you're out of your mind. Do not pay that. Don't encourage that type of behavior, although it does happen. So yeah, that's sort of my quick hit, my early impression video. Although we're coming up on half an hour now, so it wasn't so quick. A lot of rambling going on, but I hope you understand the scent a little bit better. You know, I love doing these reviews, these videos for you guys. I think, you know, there's only a couple of these on YouTube, period. There's only like a handful of reviews of Goodman's, and then maybe there's a couple people that have it in like lists or something, and that's it. So, you know, I'm sure most people are out there clicking on Elysium Intense, but for the folks going against the grain, I hope you guys like this video. It's always a pleasure. I love chatting with you guys. Cheers, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.